My name is Michael Cassutt, and on Max Headroom, I was the story editor for the spring 1987 6 episodes and the executive story editor for the 7.2 episodes we did in the fall of 1987.
The reason Mike Cassutt is called the Swiss clockmaker is because he knows everything and never gets it wrong. I can't remember. I wrote the original one in London, and I think, was I a producer?
I believe you were executive story editor.
Executive story editor. That's me then, folks, executive story editor. The words Steve Roberts and executive don't sit easily together, but you'll discover that soon.
Steve was the primary writer for Max Headroom. Those titles in television are often they're just ways to determine how little they will pay you. Well, I believe you should be the one to describe the show since you were there at the beginning.
I suppose fundamentally it is the concept that we will all eventually simply be digital as individuals.
It is the life and wild times of the world's first digital intelligence, who has the morals and attitude of a cranky teenager.
The American version of the original was shorter, and it was in 4 acts, not 2. So you had to reach a different dramatic point 4 times instead of just the once and at the end. And it shaped the end somewhat because we knew we were going into series, so that we had to find an entry into the series. But much more than that, there were a few issues. People were very keen on having relationships in these stories, which of course is a great American problem, because the assumption is that everybody has a backstory and a middle story and a future, and it's all going to end happily. And in our version of the world, that doesn't happen most of the time. In fact, in everybody's version of the world, it doesn't happen at all. But that's what the myth is all about. So we had to write a bit to the myth. Well, there wasn't a writer's room.
That's right. There was no writer's room at Max.
The idea is you go and have a bit of a chat, and then you go to the bar and have another chat, and then maybe we go and see Waggy, and he will object to something, we tend to fuck off and do it our way, and he goes, oh, all right, if you must. And it was basically done like that. The writer's room, this concept of all these minds sitting around, you see, totally alien to the way we work. The idea was, if you've hired somebody to write, let them write. Don't tell them what to write, don't guide them how to write. Sure, they've got to know the characters and all the rest are, but again, we were lucky. We didn't have to tell people this. We had a movie to show them, and they could sit and look at it, and they got it absolutely in one. And Michael got it instantaneously. I mean, he really saw where we were going. So the writer's room where people share ideas, bullshit. The writer sits down, comes at the ideas, you look at it, you go, that's terrific. What if we did this? And he either goes, no, that'll ruin it, or hey, terrific. And that's what went on. You had ideas, you talked about the ideas, and you went and did them.
Well, especially in the spring, there were only 2 of us on staff, so the writer's room was wherever we went, which, you know, could have been the hallway or Wag's office. And also, Steve was writing 2, had already written 1, and the others were in development independently and sort of came in as I joined the staff. So it was really just a question of shaping them and rewriting for budgets and things to get them on the screen. In the second 6, we added a couple of writers midway through the process, but really it still started out with just the 2 of us. There was certainly consultation with people, and that was the fun of it, is good ideas came in. We had a guy named David Brown who came in with an idea for the Academy, and it was Charlie Grant Craig came in with one that became Dream Thieves. Art Sellers came in with a terrific idea that became what is almost my favorite episode, Neurostim. Those were ideas that walked in the door, which is good because although we're just fabulously intelligent and very creative people, we don't have genius ideas every week.
I tend to restrict my genius ideas to 1 a day.
I liked writing Max to some degree, but we have to also acknowledge that Max had his own writers, David Hansen and Paul Owen, who had come over as well, who had written a lot of the other Max dialogues, monologues, things.
Yeah, because they'd done another show, you know, where he interviewed people live. He did Sting and various other people, and they were the writers for that. So they came over, as it were, to fine-tune Max's dialogue. And at one point, I got to the point where, because of their presence, and also of Matt's incredible spontaneity, I literally would write, Matt says something here. Underneath Edison Carter, that Matt speaks, because he would know right away and he would fill in instantly. And his stuff, because he understood the character, was better, I think, than any of the stuff we wrote for him.
You can't be a writer and not enjoy writing Blank Reg.
Oh, my favorite.
Because it also, Morgan Shepherd was just a solid go-to actor. He could make anything work.
And of course, for me, it was very easy because I was able to drop him into his correct London modality. So it's always right, better get the wheels back on the bus then. Now, only Morgan Shepherd could say that. I mean, you see that on a page, it's meaningless, which is why I've been loudly yelling for years and years and years, don't pitch a show, make a little trailer and go and show that. Because they're never going to understand. You had to have the show in order to pitch it. What do you mean there's this guy in a box and he talks to some bald-headed guy with tattoos? I mean, nobody will make sense of it, you see, because they're all what they have to be: successful, executive, middle-class people whose job is not to think outside the box, it's to think inside the box, because it's full of people with money to spend and you want to take it off them. That's your job, make it work. Whereas all these ruffians, you see, the lads will go out there and go, gravity, something wrong with that. Why do they go up instead of down? That's the point. And suddenly you're off, you see. Now you can have fun with that.
It's a law, but I never studied law.
Yes, yes.
I had been a completist reader of science fiction fantasy by the time I came to Max. I mean, I knew more about some authors than I ever needed to, and still do. And I certainly was canny enough to know the difference between sort of the dystopian technology is going to run amok and destroy us, and a more positivist view of what the future might be, as technology might do all these wonderful things. I freely just bebopped back and forth between them, but I simply looked at the story and the character and basically went for the laughs or the action or the fun. And if it occurred to me that this part of a story needed to give warning to the world about the danger of real-time ratings or giant corporations, then I would do it. But I also tried to play the other side and show the fun you could have. I mean, the quasi-email, the instantaneous communication. That's just the slight, if this goes on 20 minutes into the future, extrapolation.
And that's not a scientific process. You don't sit down and think, okay, what's the next step? You just let it flow. That's where the spontaneity and the freedom to operate was so useful to this show. A lot of the shows that are on now are so crippled because they're squashed into this expectation, and the expectation is inevitably, therefore, old. How does it get to be expected if it isn't ancient? So you were allowed to go ahead and think freely, and I made sure people could here, certainly, and I think it paid off every time. We thought it was hysterically funny that there should be as many as 23 networks. Network 23 was the top network. Fighting it all was with Network 24 or whatever, and we thought 23 networks, you know, what a cool idea. Well, we've got 500 on my bloody television, not that I could have a look at any of them.
We did have like a Network 99 or a Network 422, but
yeah.
Mostly we just gave them silly names anyway. Actually, the thing that I spent most of my time on was writing. You saw all the screens that were in there. I mean, they would find, I don't know, obscure adventures about the Tatars from Kyrgyzstan, and that had no sound. And so my job for much of the time I was there was writing Walla for people to record, just to play below the level of audibility in there. And I may say that I just went completely apeshit and wrote whatever I wanted. You have no idea of the philosophical arguments, you know, Wittgenstein versus Marx, all being played out, the two guys sitting around a yurt.
It's all just ever so slightly lost. My personal favourite is the one where there's a newscast going on, and you hear this voice casually saying, both warring factions in the Middle East have been given 24 hours to reach accords. If accords are not reached at that time, 2 orbital thermonuclear killer satellites will fire simultaneously. Football. And then it goes. And they basically said, guys, sort this out, or we're just going to finish you off and move on to something more important. That was Max all the way. And sometimes that stuff got obscured.
Right.
And sometimes it actually floated happily to the surface. I'm sure you've read William Gibson, the master, in my view.
Author of Neuromancer
and
Burning
and
Chrome,
many others.
things like that.
Well, he wrote Neuromancer about the same year, actually, that I wrote Max Headroom, entirely separately. Neither of us knew what the other was doing. And they're incomparable. I mean, his is a work of profound intellect, ours is just a bit of fun. But we were on a stage together, I think it was in San Francisco, at one of those huge conferences. And somebody said, how come you guys have got such incredible access to the inside, conceptual interior of what computing is and what television will become and all the rest of it? And I shuffled the question quickly over to Gibson because I didn't have the right answer. And to my great surprise, he shuffled it straight back to me because he didn't either. And eventually I said, well, the truth is, I didn't know when I wrote this, and still have trouble turning a computer on. I wrote mine on a $60 Brother portable typewriter that my wife bought me and sat going clickety-clickety-click. Over to William, who said, well, I wrote Neuromancer on an upright Olivetti the size of a bridge. Neither of us could operate a computer. That's what gave us the freedom to go where we wanted in the universe of the interior of a computer. He did so to great depth. We did ours in a more popular and jolly way, but we were both aiming for the same place. And that place is coming, by the way. Be warned.